welcome to this panel on urban solutions and smart city development. I'm Fabian Zuleeg. I'm the Chief Executive and Chief Economist of the European Policy Center. We are a Brussels-based independent think tank, and it's my pleasure to moderate this panel. But also I wanted to say that it's great to have this kind of conference in Budapest. It's been a while since we've had these kind of discussions here, so it's good to be back in Hungary and also to be back in person, and I hope this will become a permanent feature, as was mentioned at the beginning of the conference. So turning to the topic of this panel, it's rather broad, so it leaves us a lot of space to interpret, but I wanted to start with making a link to what the topic of the conference as a whole is, building sustainable democracies. So what do urban solutions, smart cities have to do with sustainable democracy? For me, I see two strong links. I think we are facing a tremendous amount of transformation. We have the digital transformation, the sustainability transformation, a transformation in global power, in politics, in demographics. And these will change they are already changing our lives, but they will change our lives even more so in future. So there will have to be responses when it comes to work, when it comes to leisure, when it comes to politics, social life. And cities are very often at the heart of these responses. But also these tremendous changes will have an impact which differs between different locations, between different groups in society. So the fairness of it, the way it affects different parts of the population will be a major factor in its success or failure. And again, cities will very often be crucial in addressing this. So I think there are a lot of things we can talk about. I think the city's dimension, the urban dimension, is very important, but it is also important to become a bit more concrete. Very often when we have these debates, particularly at the policy level, it's at a very abstract level. It's not about actually what do we do. And I think this panel is particularly focused, at least to a great degree, on what is actually being done. So I will be asking the panelists to also talk about how they see these big transformations, how they manage the transformation in their area, but also what difficulties you have encountered in these transformations. So without further ado, I will give every panelist a chance to make a short opening statement. And I will start with Róbert Braun, who is a senior researcher at the Institute for Advanced Studies.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I first congratulate to the audience to be here at the final session. Maybe as a final session, I want to start with a little reflection, and in my opening, a reflection on what has been said and what I heard at this conference. And there's two striking things. One, many have spoken about the never before seen crisis or crisis that we're experiencing. And what strikes me is that when I'm listening to most of the people, it's more the solutions business as usual, but better. And I think if there is a crisis never seen before, then probably our imagination should be a little bit more creative. And I want to start with actually the title, Urban Solutions in Smart City. I'm not a fan of neither solutionist approaches. It's pretty much engineering. I find a problem and I bring a solution, and then that creates more problems. And I'm also not very fond of the idea of smart cities, because usually not cities are smart, but people. Cities should be comfortable and healthy and resilient. Smart is an idea selling technology to mainly bureaucrats who don't understand the technology. And there has been a lot of buzz created about smart cities. So my kind of opening statement is that we, first and foremost, should radically reimagine mobility. And this radical reimagination should be returned to humane speed and take out violence, which is now the biggest characteristic of our cities. Cities are violent and they're created by cars, both pollution-wise and accident-wise. And I think one of the biggest challenges of cities will be how to get rid of them. And the second is radically reimagine placemaking. And this should be guided by the debate of public versus private. And the reimagination should focus on making as much public space open to as many people as possible. So I don't know if that helps mayors and deputy mayors, but I hope it does. But I'm a philosopher, so don't expect very practical things from me.
Thanks very much. But I'll ask you a question immediately in follow-up. Where would you say we have come closest to applying those kind of concepts you've been talking about? Or is this something which is very utopian, which we don't have seen anywhere?
Oh, there has been a lot of experiments. There are car-free cities, if you will. There are places where there is a lot of public space creation. I don't think there is one example or one city to claim. Barcelona is a good example, but there are other places. I think it's not where has this been done, but rather are there people who are imaginative enough and brave enough to challenge existing norms, behaviors, and the current imaginaries of the citizens, because I think that's one of the biggest problems. People can only imagine what they can imagine.
Thanks very much. So there's also a question to the other panelists, and how far is this something which you are considering in your day-to-day work? But we'll stay a bit closer to home now. I'll ask János Kocsány, sorry for my pronunciation, CEO of Graphisoft Park. Should go red.
Hello, hello. Yeah. So thank you for the invitation. I prepared a real presentation, how we connect to the smart city concept and how we do this job in every day. So I would like to introduce Graphisoft Park as a good illustrative case for the smart city project. Graphisoft R&D was established in 1982, far before the social changes. The software development company is one of the most successful startups in Hungary. The company has developed an architectural design software which has been the market leader ever since. By the mid-90s, the continuously growing company had outgrown its former offices and was looking for a new headquarters. Their idea was to develop a human-scaled working environment in which the offices are part of the nature, set together an R&D community with many other companies, and to integrate the education in business environment. After a careful search, our choice fell on the ground of abandoned Óbuda-gaswork. Even in this broken down shape, the whole 19th century plant with the industrial monument buildings were impressive and attractive. On the top of that, the plot is directly on the Danube riverfront. We renovated the old monument buildings and we preserved them for the following generations. It was a typical brownfield investment. Maintaining the balance between buildings and the natural environment was always an important consideration. We wanted to raise lower level new buildings than the old ones and lower than the trees in the park. We wanted to integrate the built environment to the beautiful Danube riverfront. Graphisoft Park is the first and most important innovative hub in Hungary. It provides the headquarters for Graphisoft, Microsoft, SAP, and many other leading R&D companies. The park provides high-quality working and studying environment for 5,000 employees and 1,000 students. Sustainability is a guiding principle in the new developments. We use cutting-edge technologies by the new constructions to reduce the gas emission and the energy consumption. For us, an inspiring model is the Smart City Wien framework strategy. We are firmly convinced that Budapest needs to have a similar strategy, and it is not just up to the City Hall who need to act. So we will be partner if they have such a plan. Our firm operate based upon the principle of market economy with strong focus on CSR. We are proud of not asking and receiving any state subsidy or EU funds. Our project is in all elements based on business feasibility. We want to demonstrate that it is also possible to implement the ecological principles serving the sustainability goals in a profitable business. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning on the sustainability, which you just mentioned, and we've got one panelist joining us online. So I will ask Diána Ürge-Vorsatz, who's the vice chair of Working Group 3 of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to come in. I hope the technology works and you can participate this way.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I apologize that I can't be there in person, but I have 2 COVID positive kids at home, and I decided not to risk potentially spreading the infection. And as a result, I apologize if there are background noises, but the entire family is locked in inside home. So we are sharing, lots of us are sharing lots of space. So I would very much like to applaud the first speaker because I fully agree with him that we have to go through a major reconceptualization of cities and in particular urban space, because even the mobility challenge, the only solution to it, which is able to address the multiplicity of crises that we are having together and not one by one, will, I believe, is only if we reconceptualize mobility but urban space. If you look at just climate change alone, even that, of course, and I'm sure the previous speakers already mentioned that cities have a very important role in tackling climate change, because over 70% our European population lives in cities globally, and not only Europe. Close to 80% of GDP is produced in cities. So that means close to that amount of emissions are originating ultimately from cities. But and there are lots of commitments to net zero cities and radical reductions. But so far, a lot of these are really capitalizing on imports. So still importing carbon-free energy. But what we really need is, because we need to go to actually zero, there is a lot of criticism of net zero, and we really actually have to go to zero. In order to be able to go to zero, everybody needs to go to zero. So that means it's better if we can do it within the city. And for that, I see 2 major challenges or major areas for solutions. And one is, as we mentioned, the reconceptualizing of public space, because presently the vast majority of public space, especially in European cities, is owned by or belongs to cars, to automobiles, and and that is really an impediment to actually, for a lot of things that also the previous speakers mentioned, that we need more parks and more other types of urban space, but also for other mobility solutions. So I can't allow my kids to go by bike to school because simply it's not safe. And whereas it's taken for granted that if I want to go from A to B, every city has to offer me a safe and fully, perfectly, comfortably paved connection through roads. And for my automobile, there is absolutely no expectation that the same have to happen for bicycles or for other types of mobility, non-motorized mobility. And I think the pandemic has really shown that that we just have to start to be brave and reallocate public space to other types of also mobility, but also other types of activities. And because the problem is that, yes, smart city is a nice concept, but as previous speakers already mentioned, smart city is only as smart as the people who designed it. And there can be lots of traps because, for example, you know, we can have as smart cars as possible and as clean energy as possible. But if everybody switches to automated electric vehicles, that means, and affordable electric vehicles, that means our cities are just going to be clogged and we are not going to be able to get around. So we do have to have other solutions. And finally, my last point where I think urban solutions, where we need a transformative thinking in urban solutions, is the built environment. That there is still a lot of new construction. When we have to get to zero, we cannot afford all the embodied carbon and embodied energy and embodied pollution in new building materials. We have to just live and use what we have. And instead of building new, we should reconstruct what we have. But we know by today how to reconstruct to net zero. Every single building could be net zero in Europe at least. And zero energy, not carbon, net zero energy user. And I think that's, we just have to show in our cities, we don't have time. We have to go in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've talked about cities, and now we'll turn to two major European cities to hear what you're doing and how this is working on the ground. So we'll start with Vienna. Omar Al-Rawi, City Councillor, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for the beginning, how we started about that. I think two things. Today I had a meeting with the Vice Mayor of Budapest, and we agreed that historically many cities done a lot of things which were smart, but they didn't think about labeling it as smart, and they're seeing it now afterward. The second thing is how to communicate it with your citizens, because if you tell them a concept and they read like that, and it's have to be sustainable and SDG and I don't know what, and nobody knows what this really means. And the third thing is, don't think that smart cities is only a pure technological solution, because we don't understand smart city that the refrigerator is filling itself automatically. And maybe you would see a lot of cities which are maybe in terms of technologies smarter, further, yes. But the first question I always ask myself, would I like to live there? And then very soon I say, no, they are maybe fascinating, but I would never like to live there. And that's the thing that brings us to the point. We have many pillars where we should deal with. The first one is, like the first lady said, we have a lot of challenges, we can't wait. This is the climate crisis. I remember I'm a civil engineer. When I started to work 40 years ago in Austria, we were all the time thinking how to make thermal things in the buildings because it's too cold. Now we're discussing in Vienna how to compete the heat. So it's not the cold challenge, it's not the heat challenge. It's not more a matter of ideology, it's a matter of survival. This is one of the challenges we have as cities we have to deal. You have the second challenge in the city that I mentioned, if you like to live there in the city, is the terms of life quality. And this is one of the pillars. And the third pillar is how to deal with innovations and with conservation of resources. So these three things we've done, and one of these pillars in Vienna when we talk about life quality is we decided that the social cohesion is the heart of our smart city strategy. So anything you have to do, you have to have it satisfaction and an inclusive city for all. We could then, maybe I don't want to hear the best good practice examples now or later, but when I travel, I was once in Dubai. Everybody would say that Dubai is a fantastic smart city, very, very, very developed. But then you talk to the people and say, how is the situation? And say, yes, but it's very expensive. I can't really afford the flat. I have to live in Sharjah or in Ajman because there it's cheaper. But the problem is that the next thing is every day I have to stay 2 hours in the traffic jam going to my work to Dubai. So I have to start at 5 o'clock to reach it, 2 hours back. Then I can't afford the kindergartens for my kids. I have to give them, and then the health care and all these things. And when then at the end, it's fantastic, it's everything futuristic. But when you have the whole challenges, what's happening with your social housing, affordable living, your health care, your public space, the security of my kids, could they bike or not, how to do this, all these things have to be really implemented. And when we say at the end that we make a smart city strategy, these are the guidance to the planners, to the innovators, to everybody. Think in every solutions you do, don't forget the social cohesion and the affordability for the people. Don't forget in anything you plan and do the resources conservation, because these are things maybe you never get back. And don't forget the life quality, and don't forget to use the whole innovation in terms of technical solutions for all of them. For example, I give you another example. One of the smart solutions we've done in Vienna, it might be silly for someone, but we opened recently, 3 weeks ago, the first IKEA store. IKEA, you know, the Swedish mobile house. It's in the city. You know, normally everybody knows IKEA is somewhere outside. You can't reach it with a car. There's no parking space in it. You have to go. You can purchase then the things, and it will be delivered, or you can collect it yourself. And because it's a very beautiful place, mid in Vienna, where from the roof you could see to the castle of Schönbrunn and the whole city, we made a contract with IKEA that this roof is open for everybody, and we have a non-consumption area. So every Viennese who would like to enjoy, because it's very nice, green and fantastic, they can go out, can look at Vienna, they can bring their drinks themselves. So it's inclusive, it's for everybody accessible. If you don't have a car, you can go to IKEA to buy, and we reduced the traffic, and we reduced everybody collecting all the furnitures they buy there. Yeah? This is a very small example how you could focus in everything you plan and you do. And I think that the terms of urban planning and the green yards in Vienna, I'm also responsible for the spokesman for the city development plan, that 50% of the city has to stay green. And then we took all of resilient cities. Now the last pandemic showed us who is resilient and who is not resilient. And that was the lakmus test, we say, how to see is it possible to survive or not. And I think this is the most important thing. And at the end, you have to, because I was all the time as politician thinking when we implemented the smart city strategy in Vienna, and I made the speech and the city council, I was all the time thinking, if you go to the citizens, to your voters, you have to tell them stories, and they have to understand what you're meaning. But just smart cities, this is a label, and how they can deal with it. And I think it's also a matter of how you can sell it also with a sense of humor. So when we started, for example, to make the sewage treatment in Vienna for the sewage, we made the placard that we turn your business into electricity, for example. That was a funny thing. Or when we, the Mannerschnitten, this is one of the most famous biscuits produced in Vienna, we made with them a deal that the whole energy that is supplied back to the city of Vienna in the remote heat, we made the placard, we heat with chocolate. Yeah? So everybody was these are some labels where people could really start to identify with these positions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And last but not least, the Deputy Mayor of Frankfurt, Eileen O'Sullivan.
Thank you very much for having me. So Frankfurt is a very international city, and Frankfurt is a transport hub, and Frankfurt has so many people that are active in civil society organizations that are innovative. And I think when we talk about these buzzwords, as I think many here have said, a smart city and overall also democratic transformation, I guess for me one of the questions is, how do we utilize the tools that technology and digitalization has given us to transform democratic processes, to transform the way citizens understand politics and the way that they can engage? Because I think many of you have already said this, how do we actually use public spheres to bring it back to the citizens? And we can do that also through tools of digitalization. How do we empower citizens to be able to take the space that they need, that they should have? How do we, talking about cars, I mean, if you conceptualize looking at cars and actually thinking this is a piece of someone's property parked in a public space, if you start looking at cars like that, I think it really transforms the way you understand mobility and see that, you know, someone that rides a bike takes up way less space than a car. And isn't that something that we should look at as an opportunity also to promote bike riding, for example, and make bike riding safer, as it, for example, is in Copenhagen, to actually see what opportunities we have to give the city back to the citizens as part of an environmental transformation, as a democratic and political transformation that we can go through. With regards to smart city and these buzzwords, I think I agree that a lot of local councils and cities have started using smart city as a sort of an excuse to seem transformative, when actually a lot of things that have already happened and should be happening and are expected to happen in the 21st century are now being implemented. But I think that if we look at smart city technologies, looking at, for example, vacancy management, looking at inner cities that have really suffered throughout the pandemic, to what can we do to actually use this space and, for example, support startups, support science, people that have ideas to bring them back into the inner cities, and as such democratize also the space that we do have instead of commercializing it, and support commercial places to then, for example, step up their online game, step up their transformation hub game, have mobility hubs and transport hubs outside of the city, and as such be more environmentally friendly by not having all these parcel deliveries driving into town, creating more pollution. So I think that all of these transformations that we're going through currently in the year 2021 and that the pandemic has pushed, these can also all be enhanced through digital transformation, and as such also have a value of being a democratic transformation. And I definitely think that's worth talking about, if we call it smart city or not. But I think the question at the end of the day is, what is the purpose of a smart city? And it is to help engage with the citizens, to enhance democracies, and that is what I think we really want to do in Frankfurt now.
Thanks very much. I want to throw out a bit of a challenge to the whole panel, and maybe that's only my impression, but what often strikes me is when I hear experts and practitioners that there's a gap, and that the gap is that the transformation which the experts say will have to come to achieve these is a long way away from what is actually happening. That's not to say what is happening is not good, is not positive, but if we really are talking about a fundamental change, like for example, taking away people's cars, I'm putting it very aggressively, but I think in the end, we are talking about something which will affect every person's lives. And do we have the systems, the politics, to actually go that far? Or is that something which will not be acceptable to citizens in the end? Please.
Well, there was, yesterday, somebody mentioned paradigm change. And paradigm changes take centuries. And paradigm changers are normally burnt. That's the way it goes with Galileo or Copernicus. They were not favored when they came up with this stupid idea that it's not the heavens above and the earth in the middle and the underworld down, but it's the earth is not the center of the universe. Nobody believed them. So that's paradigm change is hard and dangerous, especially for paradigm changers. Two things I wanted to mention. One, I don't think that road space is public space. Road space is private space, because the definition of a public space is that it's open to all. And obviously, road space is very much closed and rented out permanently by multiple users. So let's be, clear. Public space is a place where anyone is welcome. And I was not fair to Vienna because it's a city I love and where I live, and it is an exemplary city to live in from many aspects, and it is inclusive, and it is sustainable in the sense that it's climate friendly. So I have to congratulate Vienna, which has 100 years of history of doing so, and many cities. So you asked me an example, and I think Vienna is a good example. But to do paradigm change is do a lot of talking, and practitioners will eventually listen, and practices will adopt, because people can only imagine what they can imagine. So there needs to be a change in my language, a change in the imaginary, how we imagine the world. And this imagination can be helped by unearthing stuff. You spoke about cars. Cars, I don't know if you know, kill more than 2 million people every year, and 100 million people are injured. 80 million people have been killed by cars in the last century. And there are almost no public memorials. There are memorials to wars, there are memorials to many things. Actually, Budapest is one of the places, I don't know if you knew, even the Hungarians usually don't know. There is a public memorial in the 3rd district, and Prague is another one. But mostly, what I suggest practitioners, if they want to get rid of cars, mark the streets with blood, red signs that everybody sees that an accident has happened here. Make public memorials that bikers have been hit. And then the imaginaries will change, because then it won't be the car manufacturers who preach how great cars are, now coming electric and autonomous, but people will see that they're bloody dangerous and people die. And then Diana and I can allow our children to bike freely.
Well, I'll turn to Diana, because I wanted to pick up something which was just mentioned. Paradigm shift takes centuries. Now, given the panel you're sitting on, I don't think we have centuries. How would you say it?
You just stole my thunder. Unfortunately, we don't have centuries. In fact, we don't have decades. In fact, we are already late, but it doesn't mean that we should give up. But I think this last report of the IPCC that was published early August was an eye-opener even for me still, that whatever temperature we want to stabilize climate at, even if you go to 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, we still have to go to zero carbon emissions. So there is no choice in that. The only choice is if we do it later, we will stabilize the climate, let's say 5, 10 degrees warmer than pre-industrial. If we go to zero now, then we could still keep this at a fairly livable level as 1.5 or perhaps 2 degrees. So that means we don't have time. But you're absolutely right. I really love the question that there is a huge gap. And that's, I think, the most visible this gap is if we go to the COP. And I'm not sure how many of you will be there, but I'm sure you're going to showcase a lot of fantastic best practices. And I'm not disputing that they are fantastic best practices. But as one walks around at the COP, at the climate conference, and says, oh, everything is great. I mean, we must be just really solving this thing as everything is so fantastically smart and digital and clean and zero and everything. But then we are just going to see the second or perhaps the biggest increase in carbon dioxide emissions ever. So okay, where is the difference? And I think it would be great to have paradigm shifts, but for a long time, I've been trying to understand how come that we have been saying this for 30 years, that we are really rushing towards the cliff and nobody's doing anything, and understand why. And we have the technologies, we know that it's not going to break the bank. So why is this not happening? And there are, of course, many answers, and different people and different sciences will give different answers. But I think one very crucial problem is simply the decision-making systems are not, they are just incapable of taking any future perspectives in sight, because every mayor is appointed for 4 years. Maybe if you're lucky, you get reappointed, but still you are a fool if you really are taking a long-term interest into account, because you will lose. The same with the prime minister, the same with the ruling party, the same with companies. No company can really build for or invest in investments that return in 20 years or 50 years or so on. So right now, decision-making cycles just cannot take into account our slightly longer-term interest. And that's, I think, extremely difficult. And also, that I think these, especially in cities, these steps that we have been talking about start with very unpopular first steps. I mean, let's see just the example of Budapest. We're trying to reallocate some of the road space to bicycles. Of course, there has been a lot of upheaval. And yes, at the beginning, it's really difficult, but because to make the first steps for many people to really shift. And initially, until you can really get from A to B comfortably and safely by bike, you will not, few people will really use it, and those few who will use it are experience a lot of discomfort, and the same with cars. So while you have this hybrid, it's challenging. So I think I don't have a solution, and it would be great if our practitioner colleagues give a solution, but I'm afraid to challenge a bit the previous speaker. I don't think that paradigm shifts or just talking about will help, because most of our science shows that actual behavior change won't happen based on information. And the more information give, it doesn't help. What we see in behavioral science, what helps is the only times when we really do change behavior significantly is when there is a huge, big shift in our lives. For example, when we give birth, when we have a new job, when we move, or something like that. That's the only chance when we can have adopt new lifestyles. And this pandemic was nothing else but this. It was a mega laboratory a planetary laboratory experiment for such a chance that everybody could have adopted different lifestyle. And anyway, we had to reflect on why we are here and what's good and what's really our quality of life and so on. And still we completely wasted this chance. So I would be very interested what the practitioner colleagues say, but after the failure of us capitalizing on the enormous chances, sustainability, transformation chances that this pandemic gave us, it's to me, it's very bleak, the future, how we can really tackle this gap or bridge this gap that was in the question.
Yeah, please all feel free to come in, but Eileen, you mentioned about democratization, actually having involvement of citizens in these decisions. That clashes a bit with this idea that the decision-making processes, that the long-term horizons which we need to take into account aren't taking into account in politics. So how do we square that circle?
I think what we're talking about, these environmental changes that need to happen, I think we are an incredibly privileged academic group sitting here, and I think many of us understand the challenges of climate change, and we're wealthy enough to work around them. But a majority, I think, of our societies actually don't necessarily have these means. So to me, the question is, how do we create a majority that understands that we have a challenge? And I think many people do, but at the same time are able to actually work around this changing landscape that we will have to have, as in having less cars. If we look at Frankfurt, for example, we have incredibly high prices in housing. So, for example, a mother raising her children by herself that works in the inner city has to take the car if she wants to get into town, because she simply, for example, doesn't have the right bus line in front of her house or the trains that she can reach, and she maybe doesn't even have the time to hop onto a bike, bring her kids to the kindergarten and then get to her shift if she's not running a night shift in a hospital, for example. So I think those are realities that we also need to take into account when we're having these kind of discussions, because we're really talking on a very hypothetical level here, where we can think of solutions that sound great and that are environmentally really good, but are we actually talking about socially friendly changes too? And I think that's where these tools that, you know, I think we should really start implementing come at hand. So how do we create more democratic debates that are maybe simply debates? We don't have to come together and have one solution as a society in a city, but how do we reach those people that don't usually participate in local politics, for example? It's the same people that go to vote every 4 to 5 years. It's usually the same people that come to the committees and listen and speak about citizens, but what's actually with the people that don't have the time to participate? How do we create formats in which we can make their voices heard, understand their needs, and then also take those into account when we want to implement changes that will help us reach these climate goals? I mean, it is fairly late, let's be honest, yes, but there's still something that we have to do. So how do we reach those goals and actually make more people involved and make their life changes sustainable and adaptable to the changes that need to happen as a fact?
You emphasized for Vienna that you're very inclusive in the way you're approaching this. Is there a clash between achieving these objectives and the inclusiveness?
Well, one of the questions even you raised in preparing for this session is what are the competencies of different cities? And this is also a big, because a mayor is not a mayor. And Vienna, thanks God, we have the mayor is not only responsible for the gardens and cleaning the street, but it's also for the healthcare, for the kindergartens, for school, for social housing, for public transportation. So you can easily give a solution, an inclusive solution. But one of the things my colleague from Frankfurt mentioned is the housing problem, and this is the big issue that we said everyone who wants to live in Vienna should afford and has the possibility to live in Vienna. And that's why our social housing program, in Vienna we have 61% of all Viennese lives either in a flat that belongs to the city of Vienna or is subsidized by the city of Vienna. And one of the laws we changed 3 years ago is any developer who wants to rezone its ground and build a new building for living areas, two-thirds of all the flats that will be built new has to be in affordable living price class. So we managed that the speculation on the ground went a little back, and that's why people who lives in the city produce less CO2 in a density way of living. In density doesn't mean bad life quality. You could have innovative solution better than having all the time people leaving the city, coming in the city, living in rural areas, and this social point of being an inclusive city must be. I think we have also to be very honest to the people that at the end everybody of us is going to change his lifestyle. Yeah? We will have some solutions technically. We could have the solutions in a different way, but at the end everybody would change his or her lifestyle. But that doesn't mean that the life quality will suffer under that. And I think that we need also some positive minds how to create, for example, riding a bicycle could be a lifestyle, not only just being in a green area. One of the most funny things that I ever experienced myself, I once posted a photo that I'm going with a bicycle to the city council, and many people, maybe they could see it from my name. I was born in Baghdad, and this photo was in Iraq. It was viralic, passed by all Facebook, not because the Iraqis drive bicycle, and they never thought of driving that, and it's a car society, but they were fascinated that a politician has no security and blue lights and police in front and behind him. And just of this point of view, they say, oh my God, this is something fantastic. And the bicycle riding was at the moment one of the most fascinating situations. So maybe sometimes if we could think out of the box and try to sell a solution in a way how someone could accept it and find it, for example, if I ride a bicycle, that I am young, I am modern, I am hip, or I am, as a politician, near to the people, or whatever, yeah? That could maybe help to the solutions. I think we see it now with the vaccination. You have two kinds of persuading the people by frightening them. So this is the solution of making the street with blood and tell them if you drive a car, you're killing the people. Or you have a more positive attitude, how to attract them and take them inside. But I'm with a colleague before that, information alone will not be enough. I think it's a combination of everything, trying to persuade, trying to implement things, that at the end you have to do it, and try also to persuade and win the people to be part of this way of solutions.
Thanks. Please feel free to come back to this also in the discussion, but I wanted to also turn a bit on one of the points which Diána made, which I think is a very interesting one to look at, and that's the impact of the pandemic. What we've seen in many cities is a very significant change to traffic patterns, to working at home. There's a question, and Diána was rather negative about it, but there's a question of how have these changes affected cities, and is there a strategy of how we can actually maintain the positive impacts of what has happened? And I'm saying that also with respect, I live in Brussels. What I see in Brussels now, I might be wrong, but my impression is that traffic is going back to pre-crisis levels, that actually in some ways maybe there's even more pressure on road traffic because people are more reluctant to take the public transport solutions. So have we missed this opportunity to make these changes, or are there ways we can still lock in some of the more positive aspects? I don't know whether anyone wants to.
Well, I think in terms of this pandemic, for example, we were very glad in Vienna that we had the concept that 50% of the city should be green. So at the beginning, I remember 1 year ago when everything was locked down, it was allowed to walk and to enjoy. But I must confess that not the green places are not everywhere in Vienna. There are some places you have more green than you could you could consume and other places not. We noticed that it was a good decision that our commitment to public utilities, that the energy, the hospitalization, all the things should be in the hand of, even public transportation, in the hand of the communities. That was a good decision. We were glad that we didn't reduce the capacity of our health capacity, and everybody was telling us statistics, you are over hospitalized and you have too much beds, and that is not, this is too expensive, and try to reduce it. That was a decision where we said it's okay. We were glad that the investment in the infrastructure for the internet happened. But I must confess, even in my company was against, I'm a civil engineer, was against home office, and now they noticed, well, it's a possibility, why not? So it helped sometimes in changing the minds, but we have, for example, in terms of schooling and the kids and the second generation, I don't think that homeschooling is the only solution, especially in terms of people which comes with migration background and so on. Some of them got lost. The teacher are looking for them. They don't know where they are. In terms of the social cohesion, could everybody afford to have a laptop at home? Was it possible? So these social issues were very, very important also to rethink in the thing. So everybody who says the pandemic didn't change, I think it had some, it's terrible to say, some things where we could act or learn positively from it, and many things which shows the lack and the problems that we had in dealing in our society, how to rethink it again.
I think that one of the learnings from the pandemic is that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. In Austria, every year 2,000 children are lost from schools. And after the pandemic or during the pandemic, this increased to 6,000. So I wouldn't lock in anything, because I think when we try to generalize, that's the old way of thinking. I think instead of sustainable democracy, we need agonistic, experimental democracies. We have to realize that we don't know. I'm a philosopher, so I look for solutions in ancient Greece. So everything started in ancient Greece. Everything went wrong in ancient Greece, and I'll give you an example. Ancient Greece, Athens, relied on politicians. They were called the rhetores, the rhetors. In the city assembly, the rhetors convinced the people one way or the other. But they were not the only politicians, because in the assembly there were idiotes. They were idiots. And contrary to what idiots acquired as meaning in the late Middle Ages, actually idiotes were private individuals who were interested in politics. And they could participate in the political process not as decision makers, but as speech givers. And the biggest fight in Athens democracy was between the idiotes, the ordinary people who didn't know, and the rhetores who claimed they know. Unfortunately, they won. But maybe we should return to the idiotes. Maybe we should realize that we don't know. And I don't want to disappoint you, but science is no answer. Science is a political tool. Science was invented in the 16th, 17th centuries because people were absolutely out of space with the religious wars in Europe. And they wanted peace. And that's when science as we know it came to play, because it was claimed that science is religiously neutral and it's speaking the truth. I think one of the most important paradigm changing thoughts is we do not know. So we need small scale, continuous experiments and try to learn from that. Real life, small scale experiments, and should accept that something works for one, it might not and doesn't work for someone else. And that's not the way we think. And that's not the way capitalism works, and that's not the way modernity works, which is looking for efficiency, which is looking for economies of scale. So maybe we should give up these notions, and that might help.
Thanks very much. I am aware you will have to go on time. I will overrun a bit given that we started late, but I want to give you a chance also to make any reflections before you have to go. I also wanted to ask the audience if there is anyone who wants to come in with a question or a comment, then please indicate. I think I can just about see here, so there's certainly one. So I'll come to that after that, but given the time, I'll give you the chance before you have to catch a train.
Thank you. I am a real estate expert, so I have some good news. For example, in latest years, there are available green loans, for example, which is much better for the real estate developer. But in that case, the developer have to make sustainable solutions in the buildings. So this is also a good news, and also the subsidies are linked to the sustainable solutions when somebody would like to develop a new building. And not only we talk not only the bricks, but also where are these buildings, where are the surround, and how can then develop the whole area with the kindergarten and so on. So not only concentrating on, for example, the housing estate, but also the whole surround to decrease, for example, the traffic. Because if the mix is good between the buildings, the functions, the traffic is much lower need for the people. So that's why it's, for example, good in Vienna that they deconcentrated the authorities, and you can do something not just in the city center, but also the other districts. So that would be a very good example. So I think for the real estate developer, that would be very good to have a city plan in which they can do what is the future in the plot around, and they can apply their building, their development according to the whole area. And when it is harmonized, that would be much better for the whole citizens to decrease in the emission and so on. So we could not only concentrate on the building, zero emission, but we could also concentrate on the whole area to decrease the traffic and so on. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So I was going to take any questions now. I've seen one. If there's anyone else, then please wave. So I've got the lights in my eyes, so I don't see anyone else, so we'll take that one.
Thank you. I'm Gáspár Békés. I'm the president of the Sustainable Democracy Association Hungary, and thank you for this wonderful panel. And I have two questions, and the first one is basically, we talked about the human security aspect. Mr. Braun, you talked about the human security aspect of environmental protection, so how visualizing the threat to cyclists is an effective way of communication to convince people of imminent threats versus, well, long-term threats of, for example, climate change. So what would be the practical solutions in this case? So for example, data visualization when it comes to air pollution, or smart metering, or what would be the practical smart city solutions that help people visualize the very imminent threats of environmental change or pollution? And the second part is that what is the role of youth in the smart city question. Young people are often called digital natives, so therefore they are the most susceptible to implementing smart technologies, from apps to Internet of Things. So how do you see young people driving this change forward, and what would be their role, and how we can promote an intergenerational equity in the smart city transformation? Thank you.
So please feel free, whoever wants to pick up the questions. Diana, if you're waving, then I'll know whether you want to come in as well.
I wanted to come in for the previous question, so let's now let others answer this particular one.
So I think that was a lot of questions, but I'll answer what I remembered best, and that was, I think, one of the questions around digital natives. I myself would call myself a digital native, and I very much know that, going back to this form of participation, I know that it's actually quite hard for young people to really participate in politics, because there is obviously an age discrimination that does happen, with people not trusting young people that are under 30 to know what they're doing, and how transformational processes should be implemented and where we should be going. And I think that's where, for example, these citizen assemblies could actually help in bringing together the age people. Like, the age gap is a real issue, right? And so bringing people together with experts, with scientists, may I say, because I do believe that we don't need technocrats in political positions, but we need politicians that are able to listen to science. And so having citizens engage in new deliberative democratic formats could very much help us in understanding which way we can go. At the same time, I think what we need to do is increase the way that our communities and societies actually bring these different generations together. So, for example, what I often see is online, when students look for jobs, sometimes there are these elderly senior people that are looking for younger people that actually need them to help them explain how their new laptop works or their smartphone works. And that is something that actually us as governments should also be able to take care of and support the elderly in understanding this digital transformation and not getting lost, because that is also a question of equality, right? Everything can be digital, all our administrational offices can be digital. If those people that actually aren't as mobile as young individuals that can ride a bike cannot go to the website and register, then what use is this? So I think that's a question of equality that we need to answer. And if I just may add, I just remember one of the things that you also said, like, for example, in Frankfurt, we're currently running this pilot project with having sensors dug into the earth next to trees, where by the Internet of Things, you can send these data packages around and actually know, okay, this tree needs some water, instead of actually having people that walk around the city from like 8 o'clock in the morning onwards to give all the plants water, when not necessarily that's the most effective time to water plants. And I think in that way, for example, sustainability can be brought forward through this kind of smart city technology and can be utilized in a way that helps us.
Thank you. Anyone else wanted to come in?
Yes, for example, you know, these are goals. So you see the goals of the smart city. In Vienna, we have the goals on there. Everybody knows this SDG. We want to reduce our energy consumption by 30% to 2030 and 50% and so on and so on. But one of the goals also in terms of innovation is that Vienna will be an innovation leader by 2030, and Vienna is digitalization capital in Europe. So it plays a very sophisticated role. Without that, somebody would realize that it's happening this way. And in terms, even now in the city planning, we realized and started even to end in our buildings consumption, because this is young people don't have cars anymore. If I look to my children, my 4, only 1 has a car. And we started even now to reduce the parking spaces in new buildings. We used to have an obligation for 1 flat, 1 parking area. Now we reduced it to 100 square meter per parking area. and trying to get it back. Even we stopped to build the parking space under the earth because you can't use it afterwards in some new development areas. They are built on the rand, not at the end, not at the flat itself. So you have to walk, and if someone has to walk, maybe he will take the public transportation instead of taking his car. And this building, you can use it then for other uses because it's built up there. And we have the app of the VM Bolt, so you can ask, get answers of the city digitally, and we have the Sachs Wien. You can tell the city anything you find that is a problem. But as my colleague said at the end, we saw it now with the vaccination, we saw it with the Google test. You have some people who, for them, it's a problem to get to the website to register themselves. So when we said everyone can come to vaccinate without a previous having an appointment, suddenly many came and said, you know, it's for me too difficult to register, to give my things. Come on, just give me the peak and I want to go home. So we have, I think the challenges are on many levels, how we say always this digital poor, how you manage that a lot of these people, maybe to social contents or maybe because of the age, that they don't have this access, and this is the challenge, how to try to get both of them, but not to let the digitalization is a solution for many things.
I take it on myself to be the conservative old grandfather. I think it's great that you're digital natives. I think you're also digital naives. And I think that much of the perils that this conference has been talking about social media-wise and the extreme polarization of societies partly is because of you being digital naives, and you are using these technologies without actually reflecting on what they do. And I have to say that we have to be, I'm not anti-technology, but we have to be extremely cautious of what these technologies, smart or otherwise, the worlds that they create, because they do create, they're world making. And this is when I said I don't like the word solutions, because this is what solutionism does. It offers solutions that we are not reflecting on what kind of worlds they create. And I think that we have to be extremely vigilant of what dataification, onlineification creates, what kind of new ontologies in my world it will, forms of being, what is a datafied individual, what is happening with you as a being in the virtual world. I think we're too much buying into technology being now the solution to the perils of the globe, like climate change. And I would be, if I were in your shoes, I would be much more cautious. It's actually sometimes good to be to look like an old man. It's great.
So I will go towards the end of this panel. I was tempted to ask you all whether we will manage these transformations, but I'm not sure that I will be that optimistic if I hear the response. So I'll ask you a different question, because I think the key thing is that we will have to manage these transformations. They are happening, they are necessary. So what do you think is the key factor, a key factor, which will determine whether we do this successfully? And particularly, of course, related to the panel, what needs to be there for cities to be able to manage this. And I'll go in the same order again, so if you want to pick up any other points from the discussion, please do so, but I'll start.
Well, first and foremost, cities are great places to live. I think density is great, and the bigger the density, the better, because well-being and quality of life depends on density, better schools, better healthcare. Also, I think that when we think of our systems, as it's called, we should be more heuristic, because you mentioned that the lady who is raising her kids in the outskirts needs to take a car to go somewhere. Maybe we should rethink not only our mobilities, but the way we work, the way we consume, what we consume, how we consume, how we create our public spaces, and then maybe that proverbial lady can work at home, one solution, work in a co-working space nearby. So there are, I think if we want to tackle and not solve, tackle the challenges that we have to be much more heuristic in our thinking, and there are no yardsticks that can, should, may remain the same. I think everything needs to change. How we work, how we live, how we organize our life, and how we imagine our life. And if I can warn, then don't fall prey to easy technological solutions. They're definitely not the way forward.
Diana.
Thank you, and perhaps this will be a chance for me to be able to reflect on the previous two questions that I didn't get a chance, but they were very interesting. So getting back to the pandemic, yes, of course, there were very many bad aspects and bad impacts and negative impacts, but I think the question was about what are the positive and how can we preserve the positive. And that's extremely important, because what the pandemic did for us is to accelerate exactly some of those processes that we know we need to do anyway in order to get to an energy transition or to a net zero or climate neutrality. And one of that is urban smart cities is part, smartness is part, because it's the digitalization and the digital transformation and more service orientation rather than stuff and product orientation, and shifting more of our lives into the digital universe. And that's what we are doing now. And probably 3 years ago, this would not have been possible. That it would not have been acceptable that I'm giving this talk online while you are sitting there. And today it's perfectly normal. So there are things in also in cities and that we have already adopted. But I think we need to think this forward and take this forward. For example, we talked a lot about personal mobility, but we talked very little about things mobility, so urban logistics. And I think that's where a really big challenge we still have in the era of digitalization, because the pandemic also accelerated more e-commerce, so more online shopping. We never talk about the urban consequences of cities of this, but the result is that there are these different 10 different supermarkets and online shopping chains and different delivery services are running around the city, and these are trucks. These are really occupying a lot of space. Not even talking about the emissions. So in order and we are not even trying to optimize this, and clearly it will not be possible. Perhaps we can optimize it by company, but while we try to optimize it company by company, it's not going to work. It's only going to work if we optimize it at the whole city level, at a systemic level. But then we could have a breakthrough, because optimizing shipping within a city at the whole urban scale would certainly make a tremendous difference. And equally, I think where we are still very 19th century, and we are so far from a smart city, we tend to be very good about or very proud about public transport, and we could be, but let's think about it. We are still in I think our public transport model is still very much 20th century, not 21st century, because we are still running fixed routes, fixed timetables. Why aren't we in the era of big data and every movement being constantly tracked by whichever company, doesn't matter, companies? Why aren't we utilizing much more this information to have urban mobility also demand-based and individually based? So shared mobility, I think we need to transform our really old-fashioned public transport system to more shared mobility, much more flexible and demand-based shared mobility, which is much more optimized. So in summary, yes, there is tremendous opportunities in digitalization, but alone this won't work. We also need to reconceptualize a lot of some of our really rusty and old thinking about what the city is. And I agree with Róbert fully that we have to do almost everything different, and we have to be bold in having to change this. And I don't envy the politicians who have to start changing these, but we don't have any other choice. We have to go for it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that one thing that would also has to be rethinked again is coming back to think about values, and many new values, and one of these values is the solidarity. Within this pandemic, many people, it was really a shame that Europe, the innovation continent, was not able to produce masks. They have to import it from China. We didn't have disinfection metal that had to come from India. Now we have a problem with the chips. The cars in Germany, they're going to Kurzarbeit again because the things are not coming. A big ship in Suez Canal stands, and then the whole logistics collapses. And then even in terms of this stupid nationalism, and when the borders were closed, the whole nurseries and elder houses in Vienna and Austria collapsed. The Romanians didn't come, and the farmers couldn't make the harvest because the people from Slovakia didn't come to help. So many people suddenly started to rethink many things, and I think that should be a chance to start really a new discussion, how to rethink our values, how to deal with each other. Suddenly the heroes of the day were the ladies working in the supermarkets with really very bad wages. These were the heroes. I can remember when one engineer came to my company and said, "I'm afraid I don't want to work because there's now a pandemic, and do I have to work?" And I said, "Yes, of course, why not?" And I said, "You see, this lady down there, she's selling also." And he said, "Yeah, this is system immanent, but I'm an engineer. I'm not the doctor. If the doctor don't work and the nurse don't work, who's going then to work? And you as engineer, you have to keep the infrastructure working." So I think that it's really a chance to rethink a lot of things and solutions we thought it's already cleared, and I think that we have to rethink it. And we mentioned at the beginning that a lot of these problems and emissions and social tensions are in cities, but don't forget that the whole innovation, the whole solutions, the whole, if it's technical or even philosophical solutions, come also from the cities. So don't look at this place where the density people create a lot of problems. They could also deliver a very big chance of solutions. And I think that trying to get back to many values, we were certainly in Vienna very glad that we had farmers, so we could have our slow food production was possible, and maybe not always think how we could maximize our earnings and our profit, and leave the production in other places, and at the end, when there is a crisis, we couldn't deal with it. I think, coming back to your question, we will manage it, maybe less than good, but at the end, we don't have another choice. Climate crisis is coming. We saw the floods in Germany. People at the end will force this change also by voting. Maybe it takes a lot of time, and if you don't respond to these challenges, then you are the loser at the end, and everybody wants to survive. But I think that solidarity and keeping together in the society, in the nations, in the whole world is one of the most important things. I think we human beings wouldn't survive if we never lived in a sort of solidarity, either in a community, in a family, or where else.
Thank you.
So I think there are many things that we have to do because a digital transformation is coming. It doesn't matter if governments are ready for it or not. We are maybe even a bit too late to be reactive. There are a lot of companies, as Ms. Ürge-Vorsatz said, there are so many companies already collecting our data. I mean, everyone that has a smartphone here, we're probably all being tracked in one way or another. So I think the question is, how do we have the, we need to expect from policymakers and governments to be faster than the big companies and be able to have ethical standards and to be able to think about how are we going to use data, and we have to make it open. We have to be able to let, for example, local startups, local innovators be able to create these new programs that we will need for the digitization and digitalization of our cities. So I think a lot of the transformation that we are going to go through needs to be around citizen empowerment, needs to be about thinking faster than companies, being able to allow transformation, being able to think. Yes, I think we need to think a lot of things in a very new way, and we need to sort of be able to revolutionize our cities and the way politics work, and I think there are so many cool things that came from this pandemic. We have so many people, as was said, farmers in Vienna, that is really cool. In Frankfurt, we have urban farming that is now coming up. That is something like bringing back farming to big cities, or even starting that. Those are so many really nice, innovative things that empower citizens to take the time to be outside, to farm, to be in touch with nature, to live the city in a different way, and that needs, like, we need to be able to create the public space for that. We need to take away the room for the cars. We need to be able to make this private space a public space for everyone to live in. And so I think we need to be ambitious. We need to be able to inform our citizens, have discussions, empower them to be able to make the right decisions and have their voice be heard, every voice be heard. I want to see more young people. I want to see more women participating in politics, more people of color. And I think that one of these crucial things is, and it was mentioned in the beginning, often politicians and governments do think in election periods, but I think we as citizens and as people that are in governments, we need to push to think and make politics that go beyond the election period, because if we don't, then we will continue thinking in a short period of time, and we will not be able to really actually tackle and not solve, but actually tackle the issues that we have and that we need to be able to deal with as the people responsible for many citizens. So I'm actually quite positive that we can do it, but we actually need to get going to and not just talk about it.
Thank you very much. It's good to end on a positive, upbeat note. I was going to ask some fundamental questions at the end, because I'm not quite sure whether I'm that positive, given the scale of the challenge we're facing, but also given the trade-offs which are there between different objectives. But as we have said, this is a challenge which we will have to address. It is not a choice. It is the way the world is changing, and that is something we will have to deal with. So I'm very glad to see that certainly one thing which has changed over time is the recognition that this is something which has to be done, and that it will require action at all levels, including at the city level. And in that sense, I think we are on the right way, even though there's still a long way to go. So thank you very much to the panelists for this discussion, to the audience, and also to the organizers. As I said, it's very good to have this discussion here in Budapest, and I hope we will continue it at a time in the near future. Thank you.